Hey guys, this is a rather belated video by about 2 years about my MX5 and everything I did to it in the time I had it. It's probably helpful for those who either have one or are looking at getting one, or if you know someone who's getting an MX5. This is the Mark III particularly, but they do all suffer from similar things. Hopefully this video is some use. So a bit of background on this. When COVID kicked off in about March 2020, my job became completely remote. It was online Teams and Zoom meetings rather than cross-country travel. So I decided to sell my motorway muncher, a Mercedes C-Class. Very nice car, great to drive, but not really a driver's car, automatic, 2.1 litre diesel, not really engaging, just a very comfy car. Got rid of that, decided to get an MX5. So I didn't really know anything about them. I didn't know anyone who had one. I just knew that I wanted a rear-wheel drive manual car, something a bit more engaging, because I didn't need to sit on the M1 for hours at a time, something just to tinker with during lockdown and have an enjoyable car. I am a bit of a subject of parody for this, but I do tend to over-service and fix things that aren't broken on vehicles I own, cars and bikes. And the MX5 gives you plenty of room for this. There's certainly a lot of things to look out for. So these are not performance or tuning mods at all. These are just good ownership mods. Rust prevention, leak prevention, a couple of really easy fixes here. The other stuff really is just aesthetic, stuff that I did to the car that made it look a heck of a lot better. But I'll rattle through some of these, so let's get on with it. So a couple of years ago I made a video which was well received by the MX5 community on how to change the gearbox and the diff oil. The engine oil probably been changed as part of the routine maintenance, but the gearbox and the diff are often never touched. They're really easy to access, the drain and fill is really easy. I went through what products I used and why, because what's available on the market now is so much better than the factory fluids. The gearbox notchiness, the whine from the differential completely eliminated, and I highly recommend that video if you've not seen it. So we'll kick things off with leaks. These are quite common on the MX5, but there's some really easy fixes. I'll freeze this video showing this grommet here, which is found underneath the plastic cover and just screws down that plastic trim onto the car's body. It hides away things like the wiper motors, the washer fluid sprayers, but unfortunately it is a prominent point for leaks. The leaks, if they do occur, run the water straight through into the cabin, straight into your footwell, either driver or passenger side, depending on which side has leaked. I woke up after a night of rain to a wet footwell on the passenger side, hence the rubber replacement mats. I didn't know what was causing the issue or how to fix it. Turns out it's really simple, quite literally a couple of quid to get a replacement set of grommets. You'll pay more for postage. Really easy to change, and I decided to lather mine up in silicone as well, clear silicone, covered it all up, never had any problems again. So another night of rain and yet another leak on the MX5, this time in the boot compartment, completely soggy at the bottom. Had no idea what was causing this issue. I was looking for any obvious culprits. I ended up checking the surround, the black silicone seal that connects the boot to the boot lid. I cleaned this up, cleaned the area that it made contact with. It made no difference. Took a while to figure this one out. It turns out it was simply the light assembly that shows the rear bar brake light, shown just here. This is another really easy fix. It's accessible through the boot. You undo the nuts, lift up the light assembly and then silicone around all the area. I outlined the area with the shape of the light fixture, siliconed all around the nut and bolt holes and made sure it was really well done. Again, couple of quid's worth of silicone, I never had any problems again. So the final rain/leak related issue on the MX5, and this is really common, is the rear drain holes. I didn't know anything about these, again not having known anything about the car. Got in one day and the back was fogged up, but just on the driver's side, which I thought was weird. Figured out it's these drain holes which effectively take the rainwater from the roof into a little container. They capture it and then feed it out the bottom of the car. These can get blocked. I don't know if it's either from the top or from kicked up underneath the car like twigs and leaves and things, but either way mine were blocked. What you need to do is get a pipe cleaner, people use a trombone cleaner, feed this through until it comes out the bottom of the car. When I did this I noticed a bit of resistance at the bottom, pushed a bit harder, the leaves came out, all the water drained fine. I then used hot soapy water and Zaflora on both sides to make sure it was clean. And this is good to just do every few months just to double check these are clean. Next it's on to rust. Now I have heard a few things about how the Japanese don't salt the roads, but I don't believe that's the problem here. I think this is a specific MX5 problem. Hondas, Toyotas, they don't always have this problem, but the MX5s do. So I went under there a couple of times with a wire brush attached to a corded drill, not just a battery drill, a proper plug-in drill, and was wire brushing that rust off there as best I could, really getting at it, getting back to bare metal where possible. I then used a rust converter, I think it's called Dintrol or Dinitrol. I'll leave a link in the description to the one I used, and then I covered it in wax oil or an equivalent kind of rust preventative. That alone didn't take too long, half a day, but made a big difference. Hopefully this has been of some use to people so far and might save some people some time if they do have these problems. Quite a lot of them are just good maintenance or quick fixes if this problem occurs to them. The other bits and pieces I'm going to rattle through now are just stuff I chose to do to either enhance the look of the car, just make it more user-friendly, better for me, but I'd recommend a lot of these anyway to any MX5 owner. So one of the highly recommended things to do is to replace the door bushings. They're the male part that fits into a female recess in the door. Makes rigidity on the frame a bit better, stops the door sagging, that kind of thing. However, the factory ones are really soft. You can get a harder plastic one, reduces vibration inside the car. That was more what I was concerned about. How much it increases the stiffness in the frame, I'm not sure, but that was something I definitely found worthwhile. That did make it shut and sound like a modern German car. I also swapped out the original factory aerial, which was really long, obscenely long actually, looks quite ugly in my opinion. I swapped that out for a stubby version, simply screw off and screw on. You could always put it back to stock if needed, but this factory aerial just reminds me of the Toy Story car. The factory wheels weren't too bad. They did have signs of pitting and a tiny bit of rust, but they weren't scuffed, so I whipped these off, had them powder coated in gunmetal grey. I do regret not getting bronze or gold. I think that would have maybe looked a bit better. So I replaced the standard Bose CD player with one I got on Amazon, full screen, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. It also had settings where you could map buttons from the steering wheel. Press a button on the steering wheel, choose what you wanted that button to do on the head unit, which was really good for Siri and volume and things. So in my last video where I changed the gearbox oil, there was one thing I didn't mention. I forgot to mention this entirely, but the gear stick on the MX5 is directly above the gearbox. On many cars the gearbox is way out in front and there's a few linkages connecting the gear stick, but directly under this part of the car is the gearbox. You can actually feel the heat radiate through into the car after you've been driving it. There's a tiny nylon collar which goes into the gearbox, and obviously this wears away over time and gets a bit loose. You can replace this with a brass collar, which makes the gearbox feel so much more direct. And if you're in first, third or fifth, for example, it's a direct slot in, really improved the handling of the gearbox. It's a little bit involved changing this, so it's maybe not for everybody, but from an anorak like myself, it was certainly worth doing. So I replaced the amber indicators on the side of the car with some cheap 10 quid eBay LED smoky indicators. Really completes the look of the car and brought it forwards a decade into the future. So last but definitely not least on the things I did to my MX5 is the coolant tank. It's found under the bonnet. These cars now, or certainly mine was 15 years old at the time I had it. They've heated up a lot, they've cooled a lot, they've become brittle and they're prone to failing. If you want to go on long weekends away and want to get this completely out of your mind and not have it as an issue, you can replace, as I did, with a stainless steel welded system. Looks really nice under the bonnet. You disconnect the hoses, you remove the 3 bolts holding it in, replace the unit and get rid of that problem from your mind entirely. So hopefully this video has been of some use to you. Certainly if you're a new MX5 owner, hopefully it can fast track you through to some solutions to problems you might have. But do feel free to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll leave you with a nice cold start.